Breaking news. This is a live bulletin.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving deep into one of the most shocking and powerful events unfolding in modern Russia. Across cities, towns, and even remote regions, thousands of Russians have taken to the streets in mass protests demanding the resignation of President Vladimir Putin. What started as small gatherings of dissent has now become a wave of outrage that's spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. In a country where open opposition to the Kremlin is often silenced, these protests mark a turning point in the nation's political and social history. Let's break down how this movement started, what's fueling it, and what it could mean for the future of Russia and the world. The roots of these protests go back months, even years, as frustration over corruption, censorship, and economic hardship continued to grow. But the spark that lit the fire came from a recent government decision that pushed people over the edge. Rising inflation, new restrictions on freedom of speech, and allegations of election manipulation became too much for ordinary citizens to bear. People who had once stayed silent began to voice their anger openly. Social media, despite heavy government monitoring, became the digital battleground where calls for protests spread rapidly. Videos of police brutality and unfair arrests added fuel to the fire, convincing many that silence was no longer an option. From Moscow to St. Petersburg, from Yekaterinburg to Vladivostok, streets have filled with people waving banners, chanting slogans, and demanding change. The crowds are not just young activists or opposition leaders. They include teachers, doctors, engineers, and even retired soldiers. Many protesters say they no longer fear imprisonment or violence because they've already lost faith in the system. Their message is clear: enough is enough. They want accountability, transparency, and above all, a Russia where the people, not a single man, decide the future. Despite the growing size of the demonstrations, the Kremlin's response has been predictable and harsh. Riot police have flooded the streets, detaining thousands of demonstrators. In some regions, the internet has been restricted to prevent coordination among protesters. Independent journalists have been arrested, and state media continues to label the movement as a foreign plot, designed to destabilize the country. But even with all these measures, the protests keep growing. Many observers believe this is because the movement has no single leader to target. It's a collective voice rising from the frustration of millions. Political analysts around the world are calling this one of the most serious challenges to Putin's rule in over 2 decades. The Russian president, who has maintained power through a mix of fear, propaganda, and control, now faces a new kind of threat: unity among the people. For years, the Kremlin relied on dividing opposition groups, portraying them as radicals or traitors. But this time, the anger is coming from ordinary citizens, many of whom once supported Putin. It's not just political activists anymore, it's the working class, the middle-aged, and even former government employees who say they can no longer stay quiet. The protests have also drawn international attention. Western nations have expressed concern about the Russian government's crackdown on peaceful demonstrations. The European Union has called for restraint, while the United States has urged Moscow to respect human rights and the will of its people. At the same time, world leaders are cautious, understanding that open support for the protesters could be used by the Kremlin as evidence of foreign interference. This delicate balance highlights just how sensitive and unpredictable the situation has become. Inside Russia, however, the situation is growing tenser by the day. Footage of police dragging protesters into vans, journalists being beaten, and peaceful citizens being detained without charges have gone viral, sparking outrage across the country. For every arrest, it seems two more people step forward to take their place. This defiance is something new, a sign that fear, the Kremlin's most powerful weapon, might finally be losing its grip on the Russian people. Many compare this moment to the final years of the Soviet Union, when ordinary citizens rose up and demanded reform. The echoes of history are unmistakable. One key reason behind the movement's persistence is the role of technology. Despite government censorship, Russians have found creative ways to bypass restrictions using VPN, encrypted apps, and international media platforms. Live streams from protest sites show crowds chanting "Russia will be free" and "No to war, no to lies." For the younger generation, this is more than just a protest. It's a fight for their future, a stand against decades of control, and a demand for dignity. Even in the face of fear, they continue to share their stories online, inspiring others to join. The economic situation has also played a huge part in fueling discontent. Sanctions, declining wages, and growing inequality have left millions struggling to survive. Many Russians say they can no longer afford basic necessities, while the government spends billions on military operations abroad. The gap between the elite and the ordinary citizen has never been wider. People feel abandoned, unheard, and deceived. When survival becomes difficult, political patience runs out fast. That frustration has now transformed into mass action. Putin's image as a strong, untouchable leader is beginning to crack. For years, he portrayed himself as the protector of Russian stability and pride. But now, that same image is being challenged by the sight of thousands of people demanding his resignation. It's not just an attack on his policies, it's a direct challenge to his authority. Kremlin insiders are reportedly growing anxious, as some members of the ruling elite fear that the protests could eventually spread into the institutions of power themselves. Many experts say that what happens in the next few weeks will determine the future of Russia for decades. If the protests continue to gain momentum, they could force the government to make concessions or even trigger political reforms. On the other hand, a brutal crackdown could plunge the country into deeper repression, isolating it further from the international community. The balance is delicate, and every action from the government or the protesters could tip the scales. As the movement grows, one thing is becoming clear. The Russian people are no longer afraid to speak. The slogans painted on walls, the chants echoing through the streets, and the courage of those standing up to power all reflect a nation yearning for change. Whether or not Putin resigns, this movement has already changed Russia. It has shown the world that even under the tightest control, the human spirit cannot be silenced forever. In the coming days, all eyes will be on Moscow. Will the Kremlin attempt to crush the protests entirely, or will it seek dialogue to calm the unrest? Will the international community step up pressure, or will it remain cautious? Most importantly, will the courage of the people be enough to bring about real change? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain. The protests demanding Putin's resignation have already rewritten the story of modern Russia. Thank you for watching and staying informed. If you found this explanation helpful and want to follow more updates on this developing story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring global issues like this to light, And together, we can keep
We've
spreading
been
awareness
analyzing
about what
satellite
truly
images
matters
that
in the
confirm
world
the
today.
bridge has suffered
ChatGPT
significant
can
damage
make mistakes.
in at least 2
Check
separate
important
locations.
info.